Hey there, folks. Now, I reckon most of y'all know the Okefenokee Swamp is one of the most mysterious places down south. Stretching out for miles, it's a place where the line between the real and the supernatural gets mighty thin. Gators, snakes, thick fog rolling in at sundown. It's enough to put a shiver in your bones, but tonight, we ain't just talking about the usual dangers. No, sir. Tonight, we're going to hear the story of a park ranger who thought he'd seen it all, until one faithful night deep in the swamp he come face to face with something he couldn't explain. Something straight out of your darkest nightmares. Was it just the swamp playing tricks on him? Or did he stumble upon a creature that ain't supposed to exist? Well, settle in, because here's a story about the Okefenokee's best kept secret, and trust me, it ain't for the faint of heart. For about 10 years now, I've been a ranger in the Okefenokee Swamp Park. It's the largest blackwater swamp in the entire United States, and takes up a good chunk of southeast Georgia. The place is massive, home to all kinds of wildlife, from foxes to alligators to the occasional bear. Over the years, I've found that it's not only the wildlife that inhabits these swamps, though. There's something else out here. Not human, of course, but the swamp hides its fair share of secrets from the world beyond its waters. One of my earliest memories was during the first year as a junior ranger. I was young, maybe 25 or so, when I got the job, and they were drip-feeding me new duties as the days went by. Eventually, I got to the point where I could do patrols by myself, if there was anything that needed to be checked on, and they finally gave me the keys to the fan boats that we would use to get into the deeper parts. That's what gave me my first scare. It was getting dark out, and some folks came into the station, telling us they had been out hiking and lost one of their buddies. Not too common, considering if you take a wrong turn here, there's nothing but water and dense trees to find your way back. And unless you've got a keen eye, you're not going to notice the difference. Now, the sun had been going down, and they say they hadn't seen him in a few hours, despite calling out for him the entire way back. So, it fell on me to go out there and search while Lena, my partner on duty, was the one to take the report. I grabbed the big-ass flashlight we use for night searches, the boat keys, and headed out the door to see what I could find. They say they had come from the western part of the swamp, a more densely wooded region prone to a lot of flooding. Not a great thing right now, as the clouds were coming out from a thunderstorm yet again. Moonlight was in and out, sliding behind the clouds and plunging me into the darkness every few minutes before re-emerging again before a brief illumination whenever it felt like it. The trees above were casting eerie shadows, and every movement from around me made me jump as the night grew darker. Mosquitoes were the worst damn thing out here. Plenty of the bastards were swarming me, almost blocking the floodlight as they swirled around the beam. It was hard enough to see anything through the shadows of the trees out here, but seeing millions of tiny bugs make shadows the size of dogs in the distance, that does some weird shit to your brain. The heat didn't help much either, making my clothes stick to my sweaty skin. I was out there maybe 2 hours, moon high overhead and the sun long gone now, when the first shower finally came. Rain started falling slow at first, just a drip here and there as thunder gave ominous rumbles in the background. An occasional flash of lightning would overtake my surroundings, completely overpowering the beam of my flashlight and making the entire swamp around visible. That's when I first started to notice them. It looked like people at first, hiding behind trees, obscured in shadows and branches to keep from being seen. Some were taller than others. Some a bright, sun-bleached white, while others appeared to be covered in mold and dirt. The first one barely caught in the light as it ducked behind a tree, long white fingers on one hand being the only thing I saw before they slipped back into the darkness behind it. I saw another one 10 minutes later, though this one was much more clear. It was in the middle of the trees, partially submerged in some water and muck below. The waist up, there was a mostly decayed body, stripped by the bugs and weathered down to the bone already. Ribs holding rotten ribbons of flesh on them. It disappeared as quickly as my light hit it, one rotting eye still staring at me from its skull as it submerged under the water, leaving me shaking in fear. Despite trying to get the message back to Lena, I didn't have any signal going through on my walkie. I was finally around the space where they said they had lost their friend, and I started yelling for him. Despite how scared shitless I was, everything I had seen up to that point, I was just able to rationalize, I guess. It was my first time out in the swamp on my own, especially this late at night. The weather wasn't helping my nerves. Ahead of me, the trees opened up in the clearing. Nothing but a small pond unmarred by roots or trunks sticking through. The rain suddenly stopped, the moon appearing from behind the clouds and shining down on the dark black waters below, reflecting its light. There, standing in the middle of the clearing with hands stretched high to the sky, as if pleading for the moon to come down and meet it, was a body. Hell, a body was putting it mildly, as this thing was stripped of all flesh, empty sockets where the eyes should be as it stared up into the moon above. From where I was in the boat, I could see it was dressed in a long, flowering, white gown, almost like a wedding dress. I couldn't tell if it was looking in longing, reverence, or both, as it reached further toward the moon. It was standing atop the water surface as if it was a smooth glass floor, not even making ripples across the water as it was glowing in the moonlight beneath her. As I watched, more skeletons and decaying bodies emerged from the water, gliding upward to the surrounding skeletal bride as she continued reaching for the moon above. They grabbed her, dragging her back down below the surface of the water, as the moon was once more hidden by the clouds above. I tried shining my floodlight over to see if there's anything still there, but the clearing was completely empty, just shadows dancing off the water surfaces again. I turned tail and ran that night. We ended up finding the guy that was missing the next day. Somehow wandered right over to one of the nearby highways, though it was a hell of a walk for him to get there. Lena didn't believe me when I told her about the skeletons and decaying bodies in the water, simply looking at me like I was absolutely insane. A year or so later, we were the unlucky side of a murder, or at least it was initially called a murder. Some poor girl's body was found floating in one of the more touristy areas, totally drained of every damn drop of blood. All they were able to find was one puncture wound between her neck and shoulder. That wasn't from any animal known to be in the park, so the Georgia Bureau of Investigations came to look around. I got paired up with a guy named Sully around the swamps, investigating to see if we could find any sign of where she was killed or a possible weapon, even. Good guy. We ended up getting to be friends in the couple of weeks we were going around the whole length of the Okefenokee. One thing we agreed on: the amount of destruction being done to the environment out here needed to stop. There was a mining operation about to start nearby, extracting lithium through strip mines right outside the damn swamp borders. That was just the latest issue too, because a few of the major train yards have been dumping chemicals for the last few decades that was just now coming to light. God knows it added to the cancer clusters that have been popping up in the youth around here, taking the kids away too damn young. What we found one night, though, almost a week after beginning our investigation, made us both see that the problems were only going to get worse. Another body had turned up a day earlier, causing a whole other fuss as GBI was still trying to get a handle on the situation. This was a big guy too. They matched him up with a trucker that had gone missing a couple weeks ago. Big rig found, empty and abandoned on the side of the highway nearby. His body was pretty messed up, decay setting in, but he had a similar wound with the same telltale sign. His body was absolutely drained of blood. Sully and I spent the next day tracking deep into the swamp, trying to figure out where it could have come from based on the faint currents through the water. After about 7 hours of tracking from sun up, we found something. A shadow clearing in the middle of the northeast quadrant. Tons of trees clustered around it that kept it mostly closed off. But a small gap between that became the floodgate essentially when it rained. We theorized that was what was letting the bodies loose. allowing them to drift over to the more populated areas of the swamp where they would be found. Our theory was somewhat backed up almost immediately, and we definitely found the origin point of the dead people. Inside this clearing, bodies were piled up in various states of decay. Every single one was drained of blood, the newest corpse probably being only a few days old at the most. Alabaster, white skin, was glowing against the dark waters, making me feel nauseated in the humid afternoon. The whole area smelled of death, and the bodies adding on to the decay from rotting trees and vegetation. It was more than the time I found a rotting bear near the park entrance. Poor bastard almost torn in half by a car that hit him. They all had the same puncture wound, though it was different sides for some of the bodies. Probably just wherever the killer was able to get a good angle in. Sully pulled out his radio to make a call back to the station, letting them know what we had found. Unfortunately, they said it was going to be a bit before more people could come out thanks to an emergency in town. The downside of living in the rural South is there are only so many resources spread thin over a huge area. We would just have to set up and wait for someone to come out here. But in the meantime, we had our own plan. In the off chance the killer returned, we parked our boat a little ways downstream, anchoring it into a nearby tree out of sight. Then we got out, waders and boots on to keep from getting totally soaked as we made our way back toward a small clearing. The sun was getting low, and we knew we'd have to take position soon to make sure nothing took us by surprise. There was a little luck on our side though, because one of the old ranger outposts was nearby. A small, rotting cabin built up on rickety platforms. We crammed ourselves in, getting ready for what could be a long night. Maybe 2 hours passed with nothing. I think I ended up falling asleep on one of the rusty folding chairs left inside the post. The place was bare, an old landline phone hanging on one wall, a small desk in the corner, and one dingy light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Damn thing didn't even work, and there probably wasn't any power coming in here anyway. Sully got outside and looked around for a little bit while I was snoozing inside, and when he woke me up, he showed me the reason why we didn't have any power. The small post string and wire along for electricity was ripped out of the ground, nothing but a frayed wire still hanging loose above the water. No doubt that was a major safety hazard, but it's not like anyone had ever come out this far. We started checking the further reaches of the swamp a lot more often after this situation, hoping to avoid another pile of bodies coming up like it did. The sun was going in the sky by the time we realized our serial killer was much, much worse than some awful human. Sully had a fancy pair of night binoculars, and we were trading off back and forth watching the spot to see if anyone was coming. Hell, we were scanning the entire damn area, desperately trying to see anyone coming up before they actually got too close. That way, we could get a better look. Our worst fear was that they would come up to their dumping spot with another body to get rid of, probably drained of blood again. Of course, that was a confirmed reality just a few minutes after midnight. Nobody had shown up at her still, with the two of us debating throwing down a GPS marker and heading back to the main station. I was on watch, scanning the area from left to right when suddenly there was a figure standing in the clearing. The damn thing was huge, standing probably 9 feet tall at the least. It was holding another body, likely drained as well because it flung it to a tree a few moments after I caught sight, making it crumble to the water below. I grabbed Sully, pointing in the direction of the clearing, handing him the binoculars to get a look. His gasps were something I'll never forget, because the thing turned right towards us there. This giant bastard was like Mothman's fucked up southern cousin. Bristles of stiff spines all along its arms and legs, with at least 6 arms sprouting down the body, 2 ended in sharp points, which we initially thought was what was used to kill its victims. The others had human-like hands, though the fingers were deadly sharp at their tips. Then it looked to the body it had just thrown aside, something unfurling from its face. The huge red eyes were glowing in the moonlight, hexic patterns reflecting everything around it. As the mouth sketched, I realized it was a sharp, needle-like beak that it then punctured the fresh body with. I couldn't tell what it was doing, but the body started to shiver, something squirming though the still skin as it made itself inward. That was all me and Sully needed to see, because I had no idea what the hell this thing was other than an abomination against God. The situation with a believed murderer meant we got clearance to carry firearms, and both of us drew ours now. Sully had a rifle, while I just had a standard issued pistol. We gave ourselves a moment to prepare, grabbing a couple of old flares from within the desk in case they might come in handy, and moved out. We made it to the edge of the clearing, still hidden from this damn thing and whatever it was doing. As Sully poked his barrel around the corner, waiting for the right moment, the damn thing turned and locked its giant red eyes with mine. It wasn't human for sure, and the only thing behind those eyes was the desire to feed, breed, and eat some more. This was the stereotypical southern pest, made into one of my greatest fucking nightmares. Soon as it looked at us, Sully fired a shot off, hitting it in one arm. The damn thing took off flying, both of us firing shots up after it. I think one of our shots found the right mark because it shot through one of the wings, causing it to lose lift and start falling back down. I fired again, this time hitting it in the lower jaw, taking out a massive needle of a mouth. One more shot and we could take this thing out. My clip was empty, and when I went to reload, the mosquito man rushed at us, making me fumble the new clip into the dark water. The creature hit Sully, sending him flying backwards before splashing down into the muck behind us. I started to run back towards the outpost, picking up Sully as I went. He had lost his gun when he was thrown, meaning we were shit out of luck when it came to defense. As we hauled ourselves up onto the outpost platform, I uncapped one of the flares, throwing it at the lumbering creature now wading towards us. It didn't handle the deeper water well, despite the great height advantage it had. It was struggling to pull its feet from the muck below. As we got inside, Sully slammed the door behind us, pulling the deadbolt which snapped from rust. It was only a moment before a loud thump shook the entire outpost, the creature landing on the platform outside. There was nothing we could do but press ourselves to the back wall, hoping that it might lose interest and leave. Now would have been an awesome time for some of the others to show up like they were supposed to hours ago, but no such luck there. One of the sharp arms busted through the thin wooden door, tearing a piece out as it was pulled back. The thing was coming in now, forcing itself through a small doorway while tearing the wooden panels out from the door and wall. There was little chance for us to get away, and we had to try at least. I opened up the shutter over at the back window, exposing a dingy pane of glass roughly half my size. I pulled my arm back, smashing it with my elbow to get out, and pulling Sully out with me as the creature got closer into the outpost. Uncapping the last flare, I threw it into the window behind me, letting the bright flame ignite the old rotting wood inside. We clambered back, trying to make our way from behind the outpost back to our boat before the thing got out. The scream that damn thing let out is something I'll never forget, sounding like dozens of voices crying out all at once as the flames licked its skin. I saw the windows bust outward, the wall around it being blasted out with flames reaching closer to us. The creature fell out, body half on fire and sizzling as it fell from the platform and hit the water below. We had to get out, water splashing up through my waders at this point and chilling me in the humid air. I could see blue sparks coming a feet away in the darkness, the live wire on the post that Sully had pointed out earlier. The idea was a risky one, but if it meant I could at least take the bastard out with me, I tried. It was gurgling up from the water now, clumsily sloshing its way towards us in the dark water. Nothing was going to stop the bastard, but I made my way as quickly as I could over to the post. My waders were made of rubber, so I hoped this half-baked scheme would work. As the thing got closer, I reached out, grabbing onto it and using its own offbeat momentum to swing it around to the other side of me. It landed right on target, face first into the live wire. I felt a brief shock as my hands let go of its body, noticing smoke rising from it as it convulsed atop the post. A couple of moments passed before the wire shorted out, the creature going limp against the post as it died. The outpost was still going up in flames around us as we both lifted the body, bringing it towards the massive pier. It became that thing's funeral when we threw it on top, letting it burn away before it had any chance to pull some shit and come back at us. There was no sound from it, just the crackling flames as the outpost burned, smoke rising into the sky above. Screams started coming out from the clearing, this time more high-pitched than the last, but all in a terrible disordance that sounded like the choir of hell. We covered our ears, looking back at the clearing as the moonlight illuminated 3 small bodies, each one maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. One of them took to the air, massive needle mouth extending under the glowing red eyes. This fucking thing was nesting its eggs in the dead bodies, reproducing. I went back to the boat, grabbing the flare gun and a can of gasoline while Sully made his way to the small ones. They didn't put up much of a fight, thankfully, and he was able to crush them relatively easy underfoot. We started moving every body we found, piling them in the driest place we could find before dousing them in gasoline. When they were soaked, we went back to the boat, carefully aiming the flare gun at the pile through the clearing before pulling the trigger. Everybody in that pile went up that night. I still don't know who all of them were, and it's likely their poor families may never get closure. But after seeing what that thing had nested in them, I think we did them a service burning the bodies. Sully and I both gave the same report, though GBI didn't seem to believe it. Every time we've talked about it since, we've wondered, was it just some freak of nature cryptid or a mutant abomination made by the pollution taking hold? My bet is on the pollution, chemicals probably getting into the mosquito spawn and making, well, these bastards. We've made it a point when anybody's come up in a swamp now to watch them for a few days, making sure they don't reproduce into more of the damn things. Despite how terrifying it could be out here, there were times when the supernatural stuff could be oddly beautiful. There's a pretty common phenomenon that I still don't really know if it's real or something more beyond out of the world, but I've seen it enough to know that it's not entirely normal. Swamp lights. Small floating torches in the dark that move of their own accord through the air. Some say they're called ball lightning. Others believe it's some combination of gas and heat in the air. Those of us in the ranger station have realized it's something a little more than that. This was something we would see probably every other week. Just faint glows in the distance from our outpost, or even along the tree lines while we were out on patrol. There was no telling where they would turn up, but we knew if they were out there we had some searching to do. Every time a swamp light popped up, floating above the water, it was like a beacon guiding us towards something. That something was, unfortunately, usually a body of someone who got lost or just wandered into the wrong area. They're not even terrifying, but more just sad. Every time we would see one, it was a sign to get out the nets and drag the water. Granted, that wasn't always the case, and we think some were just stray spirits left to wander, unable to move on even after the bodies were taken for burial. I think they got lonely sometimes too, because just floating out there in search of someone, something, to actually acknowledge that they were once there. One night when I was out on the main platform, I looked off into the trees to see what almost looked like Christmas lights blinking in and out, but way larger than any of the fireflies that were out here. That sent a bad feeling down my spine, hoping that I wasn't about to stumble upon a mass grave or anything. The lights were just there though, zipping over the water and, if I'm right, chasing each other in play. We dredged the area the next day, but no bodies came up. All I can assume is that they were just lost souls who finally met up with each other, finally enjoying a little company after so long searching in the dark. My last encounter was 2 years ago. Since then, I've mostly retired to life as a desk jockey, taking my leave of having to wander the muck out here. It was bright out, midday, and I was doing some land survey work to make sure local wildlife wasn't being overtaken by some invasive flora we've had popping up. I was near one of the nicer outposts, this one with some air conditioning and a couple amenities for anyone that needed them, when I decided to take a break for lunch. Considering fall was coming, I decided to eat my lunch out on the platform and look out at everything. Nature out here was beautiful, with every shade of green imaginable playing off the sunlight high in the sky. I think I ended up sitting out there for an hour after I finished eating, just taking in the peace of it all and watching alligators float lazily along the water beyond. I was zoning out, looking at one of the nearby tree banks a couple dozen meters away, when it began walking through the background where I was staring. This thing was tall. Hell, even taller than the mosquito creature at around 12 feet by my best estimation. It was built like a 10-ton brick shithouse too. This damn thing looked like it could lift a truck if it needed to. Dark brown fur was matted up and down its body, with small beady eyes staring out above an elongated snout. Ferocious teeth curled down out from its lips from top to bottom, saliva dripping from them as it traversed the mud across the way. I could see sharp claws gripping trees as it hopped from bank to bank, leaving deep furrows in the bark as it went. I don't know if I made a sound or if it just smelled me, but it stopped dead in its tracks, turned, looking right at me. A howl like I'd never heard before ripped through the air before it tore into the water, splashing towards me on the platform. I was up and inside fast. I shook the entire outpost when I slammed the door, and it shook the whole place again when it bashed up against it. I pulled the deadbolt and chain on the door, hoping to whatever god there was that it wouldn't break through. It kept beating at the door till her claws ripping at the other side trying to get in. I don't know what it wanted with me or if I was just unlucky enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The beating on the door stopped suddenly, heavy, plodding footfalls walking around the outpost platform, looking for another way in. I didn't have any time to waste. Staying out here as long as I had taught me that sometimes it was best to defend myself first, no matter what danger it posted to wildlife. I ran toward the gun locker, pulling out a pump shotgun inside, loading in 2 shells before cocking it. The monster threw itself against the opposite wall from me, desperately trying to break it down to get in. I could hear the ferocious growls constantly, like a rabid dog desperately trying to bite whoever would come near enough. It was about to pass in front of the window now, and I knew I only had one chance to get this right, or I may die out here. I raised a gun to my shoulder, taking aim square at the window, holding my breath, finger on the trigger. The creature suddenly ran from the side, slamming a massive claw against the window to break it open. As it began climbing through to get me, I fired off the first shot, catching it in the right shoulder. I pumped the gun again, pulling it back up to my throbbing shoulder. The kickback on this thing was more than what I was used to, and I was going to be sore the next damn week afterwards. It still tried coming at me again, but I fired off the second shell, quickly ejecting it and pulling more out to reload. The shot peppered the thing right in the face, blowing off some of the skin around its skull. Despite all that, eye now staring at me, unable to close, and half of its mouth fixed in a wicked snarl, tears of flesh hanging from the inside. It turned tail and ran off. Explaining the broken window and huge gashes on the door was surprisingly easy. We had an understanding at this point that weird shit happens out here, and sometimes the place just needed repairs when wildlife got uppity or bad weather happened. Most of the official expense reports mentioned bad weather, but on occasion, we would have fun with them, making up random bullshit to send off to the state auditors. Not like they were going to come out here and check it on it themselves. I haven't seen the damn son of a bitch since. Thank God. I have heard some of the younger rangers tell tales of howling late at night and seeing a massive creature walking through the trees, just beyond the shadows of what they could see. Shining a light on it only causes bright green eyes to reflect back when they see it. That's usually all it takes for them to turn tail and run. I still work here, but like I said, I stick to desk jobs now. The younger folk can go out and deal with all the craziness the Okefenokee has to offer. I think I'll stay right up here in the air conditioning.